business model canvas I'm going to talk about, but let me start with lean startup, right? So startups are not like big companies. Why not? Why are startups different than big companies? Any reason why? Like, why is your startup different than Apple? Why would that be? Most people. Yeah, you have small, you're resource constrained, right? You have a small team, money, yeah, less capital.
Like you can be quicker on your feet. Like
more nimble.
You don't have to like turn around like
right. Yeah, every time Apple launches a product, it takes years of planning, right? To even do that thing at their SpaceX, right? 6 years of planning. What else? Absolutely. Back to what you guys said, right? Some of your startups have very ambitious goals. I'm not saying the big companies don't, but they tend to be much more targeted, right? You guys mentioned profitability. I know Apple's very focused on profitability, right? Go ahead.
I was going to say, startups a lot of the time tend to have like one focused goal versus a company can be way more broad with the areas.
Yes, they grow over time, right? And they have different, like with Apple, like they started out with the iPod, then being a phone, and now the iTunes and movies, right? They've grown into. Okay, so yes, we know startups are different. They're not like the big companies. And one specific one is that they have a different way of operating their business, right? And this not to discourage you. Startup companies also fail. Another big difference is startup companies will fail 90% of the time. And then what I want to say about the fail forward is if you're gonna fail, then fail fast and fail by learning, right? Without wasting a lot of resources. So we were talking about the capital constraint and the resource constraint. So if I'm talking about IBM, their business model is well known, right? Hardware, software, technology, enable other big companies. So it's a B2B, business to business model, right? Helping other big companies thrive, do better, deliver new products, etc. So their business models are well known. With the startups, you're still trying to figure it out, right? And this is why Lean Startup was written, because you're trying to figure out your business model. And what do I mean by business model? Anybody have a sense of what is this business model, or what's a definition? What do I mean by business model? I know I don't have marketing or business students. So
how you get revenue. That's the business.
It's a way to make money, right? It's a way to make money. Good one. What were you gonna say? Yeah. So a business model is basically figuring out how everything fits together, right? Your company, your product, who are the customers, what do you charge them, what costs you're gonna have, right? And add it together, and hopefully you have plus at the end, right? So that business model design for IBM, that business model has been around for 50, 60 years, right? They're not trying to change that. But your startup, yes, you might change from this quarter to next quarter, right? Depending on how successful you are and you're experimenting, right? And I think that's the whole idea behind the Lean Startup, is that I'm trying to come up with a business model through this business model canvas I'm going to talk to you guys about. Also trying to, and I love telling this to my programming students, it's a loop. Your customer development is a loop. You're trying to, right? Start from A, go to B, fail at C, go back to A again, right? So it's a loop in terms of your customer development. And it's agile in that it's experimental. I'm going to design a way for me to do this. And if it doesn't work, I'll come up with another way, right? So it's these three things together is what makes up Lean Startup. So, there's also, I think we have the handout, yeah, the why the lean startup changes everything. So it's a quick capture, I'd say, of the book. So if you want just a quick read, I have that for you guys. And don't read it now, read it after class. But the key part I want to say, so I mentioned the business model, right? In lean startup, I'm trying to come up with a new business model, a way to make money, a way to bring everything together. But the second part of that is that customer discovery. And why is that important? Why is it important to find out customers, guys? How? By paying, yeah, by paying for those services or buying your products. And why do you think this is an iterative process? Can I just find a one customer and then let it be over with? Why doesn't it work that way? Exactly. They're not going to keep coming back. And then sometimes their tastes and values change, right? Think about the 90s customer. They're the hipster Apple guy, but maybe not the same customer that's buying Apple right now, right? So your customers change, and then you need to figure out what their burning needs are. And this is why it's iterative. And the way it's iterating is what we call pivots. So I'm going to get into that. Not in the basketball way, in the lean startup way. So that's all captured in the article, but also in the book if you guys want the more in-depth version. Okay, so simply put, if I have this business model canvas, you probably have heard about how Southwest, their business model was captured on a napkin. It was just a triangle. The Southwest business model was a triangle, showing that there are the 3 spots that Herb Keller was going to fly to develop his airline, right? So business model doesn't have to be a 50-page, who was saying that? A 50-page business plan. It's the better, the simpler it is, the easier to understand, the better it is. So this is why the lean startup is trying to simplify it, right? By giving you these 9 blocks. So you start out with, what do you do? Back to what I did with the values. What do you do, right? What does your company do? And I'm asking the same question of you as a future employee, as a future founder. What do you do, right? And I know a lot of founders tend to start with, and this is the same thing I saw what Steve Jobs was criticizing. He wants to talk about technology as a way of life, right? He doesn't talk about technology in terms of you're getting more gigs, you're getting more speed, you're getting, right? He doesn't talk about it that way. So similarly, I would say for a lot of founders, usually they start with, oh, I'm giving you a this new technology that'll do this better. But they don't tie it all the way back to their customers in terms of, well, why is this better for the cancer patients? Or why is this better for the underserved communities? So it's hard, I would say, to do it well. But because this is an iterative process, you should always start here. And even however bad it is, start here. Figure out what your initial value proposition is. And then when you're doing all that testing and validation, that's when you can check and experiment, right? Put on your engineering mindset. Is this going to work? Then you can put down the final version. Yeah. So back to the explanation. I'm going to show you some examples anyways, but it's usually capturing what it is that your product or your company does. That's the value proposition. And then here are all the other pieces in terms of running your company, right? Who's going to help you do that? Who does it benefit? Who else is going to come and help you do this? So in the cancer journey piece, it might be the pharma companies, it might be NGOs, it might be governments, right? It could be other nonprofits. They could all be your partners, right? How do you do it? Well, I'm going to raise money, or I'm going to develop this amazing drug, or I'm going to have this service that's going to be unique to get to the cancer patients. What do I need? I need to raise money, right? Or I need partners, or I need government funding, right? The capital and the resources. How are you going to interact? Well, if it's cancer patients, do I work with them or do I work with their families, right? Be clear about who you're interacting with. And then in sales, we usually talk about there's the customers, but there's also the influencers, right? Or gatekeepers even. Because in a family, I know in my family, my mom kept a purse, but my dad is the intellectual guy saying, oh yeah, that's a good idea. But then my mom's the one that wrote the check. So companies are that way too, right? There's some people you need to influence for them to say, oh yeah, you want to look at this. But then the check is usually written by the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, right? And then the users are somebody in that department. So I learned this from IBM, right? There are many influencers. There's usually one or two financial decision makers, and then the users could be spread out everywhere, right? With technology. So yeah, so how would you interact? How do you reach them? So this is interesting. I just had this with Nike. Nike for 2 or 3 years went to the direct-to-consumer model. You guys know what that means, right? B2C. So they went to their website. They wanted people to order directly from Nike.com or Nike app. So they did that for 3 years and realized, this doesn't work. Any guesses as to why it's not working? It's working somewhat, but not that well. Yeah, people need to try them on. What else?
From a financial standpoint, they have to handle all of the like distribution and all those.
Yeah, it's more complicated, right? Any other reason? Yeah, not everybody adopted the app. Okay, I have a surprise one. It's the bots. The bots are signing up and buying up those shoes and reselling them. Oops. So now they're back to, okay, we need distributors. Distributors being Foot Locker, Macy's. Where do you guys buy shoes? You tell me. Zappos, Amazon? What? Where else? What was that? Oh, okay, yeah. So that's what I mean, right? Like depending on whether you're B2C, direct to consumer, or B2B, you're gonna have different distribution channels. And then the customer segments, right? If I think about who buys Nikes, there's so many segments, right? So how would you segment them? If you need to. If you're a small startup, you might only start out with one. But over time, we were talking about growth, right? You might grow to other customers that will buy those shoes. What would it cost? Well, Nike's figured out, we're going to make those overseas. Cheaper to make those sneakers overseas. But we do the branding design in the US. How much will you make? How am I going to charge for them, right? Where am I going to get the revenue? Do I charge the distributor and then the final consumer is a different price, right? How do I manage that? Okay, so you guys get the idea with this. So I want to go over the examples of how to look at these different business model canvas, right? Have you guys heard of Silicon Valley Bank? It famously went down. So what are their products? See here, they only said products. They actually didn't say what's their value proposition, right? Aren't those two different things? Here, they're only saying, here are my two products. But Silicon Valley Bank had a value proposition, right? We serve entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, right? But anyways, we're not talking about that. That's a whole other lecture. But mainly, how do banks make money? They take your deposits, right? Any of you have a checking account, savings account? They take your money and then they loan it out, right? Deposits, which is they call low interest, right? And then when they loan it out, they're earning the money on the spread, right? They take your deposits for 1%, and then they loan it out for 3%. So they make the 2%, right? So that's how they make money, right? The business model is to rely on the spread. Now, the key operations, right? They have to run the branches. They have call centers for the 800 number. They have the IT to run the apps, right? And then the key resources is the banks. And then obviously the loans are their assets, which I kind of back, because usually you think loans are liabilities, but in the case of a bank, it's an asset, right? Partners, so people that invest with the bank. So sometimes when you hold a savings account, you also buy stocks through them, right? Investment. Technology, people who sell IBM. IBM sold a lot of their machines to the banks. And then the SEC, right? The regulatory agencies that regulate the banks. And then relationships. So personal banking, right? So Silicon Valley, all those entrepreneurs, all those founders, all those venture capital guys had relationships, right? That's why they all banked at Silicon Valley Bank. Channels, again, you know, any of the banks you think of, right? Chase, Wells Fargo, they have branches, ATMs, call centers, apps. And then the customers, so the retail customers are people who deposit at your bank, right? And then the corporate customers are people who either borrow money from you or take out the loans or invest, right? The investments. Cost structure, again, my interest, right? When I have to pay out my interest to the deposits, that's my cost. Also to run all these distribution is a cost. And then my revenue are the income I earn from the loans and from the deposits or fees. People hate those, right? You over withdraw, fees. Every time I want to transfer money, fees. Venmo, fees. So that makes sense, right? How does a bank make money? They make it on the interest spread, and then they make it on some of those fees. Okay, so then the more complicated one is LinkedIn, right? This is a social media business. So when LinkedIn started, it's what we call one-sided network. It's just a bunch of people who want their professional acquaintances to interact with each other, right? That's called one-sided. But then it becomes two-sided when the recruiters and the HR people now want to tap into that network, right? So they can find future employees. Have you guys heard of that? Like one-sided network versus two-sided? Kind of, yeah. So iTunes was that way too. iTunes initially was just a way to give Apple devices your music and your movies, right? But then who wanted some of that information? Can you think of who might want that information? Advertisers? Who else? Record labels? Streaming companies? Right? Wouldn't it be nice to know who downloaded what? How much? Yeah. So that's how one-sided can turn into two-sided, because then the information, right, becomes a value. Yes. You're the product. Okay. So I won't get into too much, but because it's two-sided, they have multiple revenue streams, right? So helping people identify talent, reach your target audience with the ads, manage your own professional network, right? So that's to us who are LinkedIn users. The talent is for the other side, right? The HR recruiter people finding them. And then the advertisers can find the right target. And then just in terms of coloring, the yellow, I think, is also, they both look yellow. I think this is revenue, but this is cost. So right now they all look the same. So in other words, when I charge premium, I make money, right? When I offer it to the HR people, I earn money. Or when I sell it as an advertising tool, I make money. See? I have multiple ways of monetizing or multiple business models. You see that here? So So again, I know a lot of my students want to do social media platforms, but usually you have to start with just the one side. Most startups don't start out as two-sided right away. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing, right? you have to have a network in order to sell it to the recruiters. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So if I'm a venture capital guy, how do I know which one I want to invest in? If I'm looking at this, if I'm looking at my business model canvas, right? Yes, that's right there in the value proposition. And the key there, he says, sustainable, as in, if you're just the first mover and then everybody else, because Netflix is that, right? Netflix had the first mover advantage in streaming. Now everybody else is coming in. So is that sustainable? Maybe, right? Maybe. Usually there are some good first mover advantages, like what we were saying about the data. They have 10 years worth more data than everybody else. Is that sustainable? Right? Possibly. What else would be sustainable? The customers that love you will never ever leave you for anybody else. Some Apple users are like that, right? I don't know if that's any one of you guys. Is there any Apple only people here? I'll never use anybody else. But anyways, that's sustainable, right? The brand preference. So brands are a sustainable advantage, no?
It's sustainable unless you try to rebrand those badly.
Yes,
Or
you
don't
destroy your
continue to
brand.
innovate.
Yeah, you destroy your brand or you let it go out of style, right? But I want to say back to what I initially started with the personal brand. If you build a good brand for yourself, I would hope it's sustainable, right? Unless you try to rebrand it and goes badly and people are like, what's that person doing? So back to what I said about being intentional, right? When you are intentional about building your brand, like think about the sustainable piece of it too, right? What do you want to continue to keep about yourself? Your strength, right? And then what kind of weaknesses do you want to, make some changes on? But I also don't want to say like, oh, you need to get rid of all your weaknesses. Our weaknesses make us human, right? Back to what I said about the fail forward. Okay, what else? So this is Bill Gurley. He's the guy that I think he mentored the Uber founder guy, Travis, Travis Kalanick. That's what he's famous for. But long story short, like investors will have different preferences because usually they don't only look at this, right? They're also looking at who are you network with, right? I've heard that many times with the venture capital people. Like, who do we know that knows you, right? They kind of want some sort of social proof. Like, are you for real? Do you know the same people we know? Do you know these other entrepreneurs? So you mentioned that example about somebody you know that went to a conference. That's how that happens, right? You tap into the right network, and all of a sudden they vouch for you. You have the network effect working for you. Okay, partners. Again, if you only have one partner, so this was, I think when IBM started, they picked Windows and somebody else, but somehow Windows bought that company and made sure they were the only one. So that was good business, right? Who knew Bill Gates was so smart back then? But, they knew Microsoft had the one key partner being IBM, but they made sure IBM couldn't have anybody else either, right? It was a codependency, not just IBM gets to pick whoever, right? Made the whatever, the Shark Tank idea, right? Let the best come up. Microsoft found a way to make sure they were indispensable. Okay, and then customers. If you have, how would I explain this one? Customer concentration. you'll want to have customers, like I said, that love you, right? Like, you don't want customers that have like 1,000 choices. Like airlines are like that. Airlines are always competing. You can always choose somebody else, right? I haven't met anybody who's like, I'll only fly this one airline and never anybody else. Whereas with our computers and other devices, we might have those kind of clothing, right? We might do that. But when you have a lot of customers, I think venture capital is like that, right? Versus if you only have one major customer being IBM, then that's not a great thing in terms of looking at the future sustainable, right? What's sustainable if you only have one key customer or if you only have one or two key customers. Okay, and then cost structure. Obviously, you want high margin. So back to what I said, airlines, low margin, right? Airlines don't make that much on your seat. What would be a high margin item?
Clothing a lot of the time.
Some of them, the branded, right?
Yes.
The highly branded luxury type.
Yes.
Right. Nike?
Yes.
What else?
Skincare.
Devices. Skincare? Is that what they said? Cosmetics? Yeah, cosmetics. So high margin gives you more revenue, right? More revenue to put into some of these investments. So, but you have to make the choice sometimes, right? Like, I want the luxury segment or I want the mass produce. And then revenue stream, back to what I said about LinkedIn. Once they figured out they are one-sided, two-sided, they have ways of figuring out new services, right? To leverage what LinkedIn's network could do. Okay, enough about that. Okay, so I want to get into some concepts within lean startup, and that being, it's called MVP, and I don't mean in the basketball or baseball sense. MVP is the minimally viable product. So what do I mean by that? Well, usually if it's software, it's your beta version, right? It works well enough, but doesn't check all the boxes, right? So that's your minimally viable version. And when in doubt, I say simplify. So all the sprinkles, that's not my MVP. My plain donut is my MVP, right? And you can see that people probably charge premium for this. But if I'm just giving you the basic, a lot of companies do freemium, right? Let me give you my basic for freemium. Since it's free, you won't complain too much. And then when I build this version, that's when I'm going to charge you the premium. That's what you're seeing with LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn built this version and they started charging the premium price. What else is an MVP that you've seen? How is it that it's an MVP or MVP? When they started, you mean?
Well, they have their like free version.
Yeah.
Where you can make a playlist and
Yeah.
put music on it, but you can't pick what artist.
Right.
And you have to listen to a ton of advertisements. It'll meet your basic needs, but if you pay for the premium version,
then you'll get all the sprinkles. Right. But for a startup company, the MVP is even smaller than that, actually. So if you think about when, let's say Spotify is just starting, if you're creating Spotify, what would you allow people to do to minimally satisfy what they want? What services would you make sure to have?
A catalog of their music.
Yeah.
That they can save.
Yeah.
And play.
Yep. That's it. Right? That's it. You don't need all the sprinkles. What else would be an MVP you've seen or played with or would want to try to create? Yeah. But what would be the feature you need to have? If you're just building the simplest shoe ever, what would be in it or what would it do?
I guess something on the bottom.
A sole? A sole? Yeah, a flip-flop, right? A flip flop, just a sole and something to hold your feet to it. That's it, right? What else?
Like 7 seats. Like 7.
Yeah. Right, right. But if you're starting an airline, what would be the minimal service you need to provide? Place on a plane? Just somewhere on the plane, right? I know that the Ryanair, somebody has stand-up seats they're trying to create, but right? Because the minimal viable product isn't a seat. It's the service is to get you from point A to point B. So whether you're sitting or standing, they don't care, right? What's right? If you think about what's the minimum, what's the least amount, the cheapest I can put in terms of transportation service is just a way to get you from point A to point B. And it doesn't mean a seat, right? Yeah, yeah. Anything else? How about on software? I know there's some CS people here. What is an MVP? What kind of cars? Tesla as an MVP, you mean?
No, I have no money.
Yeah. The when you go to the dealer, they give you the most basic version, but then you always walk out of there with like 3 or 4 upgrades, right? Yeah. But I would say try to differentiate between I think what you're saying is more of a pricing thing. When they give you the basic, it's a mind trick, right? It's like, oh, our prices start at 30,000. And you think like, oh yeah, that's affordable. But by the time you walk out, it's 60, right? So it's what I call decoy pricing. And I don't know if you guys have seen this. If you go to Apple, there's usually 3, right? There's the basic, and there's a medium that they charge like only $100 less than the premium. And which one do you end up choosing? Does anybody choose the medium one? And they know that. Why? Why do they put the medium one right there? Exactly. Popcorn. Do you buy the cheapest, or do you buy the deluxe, which is only $1 more than the medium? Drinks. How do they trick you there? Yeah. Why they only give you 3 sizes?
Also, they don't necessarily state the size of the website.
Exactly. But at the movie theater, do you go for the big drinks or the small? Big. Why? Why? Yeah. No, I know. Tell me. I always get in trouble with this one. Go ahead.
Because everyone rates it, the one is the orange and the next smallest one is maybe
Yeah.
they will think, oh, it's not. They're charging you for the small.
Yeah. So, and then when I buy the small drinks, you know, I guess, they're playing with our psychology, right? So if you want the deal, you went for the big. If you want just the basic MVP, you went for the small. What else?
Like 5, 2,
Yeah. Yeah. And same thing, they've done tests where the price is the same for buying one or buy 2, get 1 free, but people do the buy 2, get 1 free. Psychology, right? I'm getting a deal. Yeah. Okay, so enough about MVP. The idea being, so I think what you're saying is more like a pricing decoy trick, but in terms of being a founder of a company, it's trying to figure out what's good enough for your customer. That's what I mean by MVP. So if somebody came for a donut and I gave them a bagel, is that good enough? No, right? Because that's not what they came for. Or I gave them a cookie. No, they came here for a donut. Then that will be okay, right? And this is why you need to understand your customer. Okay, so I'm gonna get to the basketball analogy. So you see, well, that's not quite pivoting, right? Well, no, he does. He's pivoting. I mentioned that in terms of the iteration, this is pivoting, not the basketball version, right? This is pivoting. Okay, where are my customers? Do they want donut or they want pastry? Do I give them the plane or do I give them a bagel? Right? That's your pivoting. So sometimes, so there's different types, right? Here are the different types of pivoting. I'll just go through a few of them. So zoom in means whatever I said I was going to do, my big sky and the, big blue sky project, I'm only going to, because I'm a startup, I'm only going to focus on the small piece. So that donut shop, I'm only going to do plain donuts. Nothing wrong with that, right? If I have customers willing to buy it. And then zoom out is when I have multiple products and fold into one. So zoom in, I'm trying to think some examples. Who's a zoom in versus who's a zoom out?
A zoom out would be like an iPad because they took all these different devices.
Yeah, and put it on onto one device, right? Whereas iPod was just music. And then customer segment pivot is, even though initially I'm selling to maybe boomers, and now I want to switch to moms, then I would change some of those features, right? So different sets of customers based on what I know about what they like versus what they don't like. A platform pivot would be, is that even true? Most people start on mobile these days anyways. Before there was the whole idea like, oh, do I want to start with a website or do I want to go to mobile? Now it's just like mobile. That's not even a question anymore. And then channel pivot. So back to what I said, that was what Nike was trying to do. Changing your channel is actually very hard. So they were trying to change from wholesalers to direct to consumers. Now back to wholesalers. Go ahead.
What an example of a zoom in, like those new flip phones that are smartphones, where the entire feature of the phone is it's a regular phone, but now you can fold it up.
Is that a zoom in? I would say that's just more technology.
Okay.
Yeah. As opposed to customer, because this is having to do with thinking about your customers, right? Large set of customers, small set, niche customers versus mass producing customers, one set of demographics to another. So I think this is more just on customers and how you want to deliver to them and why you're choosing one set versus another. Okay, so that's that about pivot. I also like the idea of I tell them to keep an index card of all their different business model canvas, because guess what? It changes. And similar to why I keep these, not that you're going to find me in 20 years, but if you do, I'm going to show you yours. Because there's something about reflecting back to your initial hypothesis, right? And I think for all of us, it's worth revisiting. Well, why did we switch from moms to boomers? Or why do we want to change from whatever, like the iPod device to the iPhone, right? Like being very clear about why you're doing that. Back to your values chart is what's going to remind the founders. And right now, a lot of them are going through this right now because they can't get the funding. They don't have enough resources, right? To do all the pie in the sky projects. So now they have to zoom in like, okay, I can only afford one project. So which one is it? And it's really worth revisiting your wheel to remember, okay, which one of my product is gonna expand the pie? Which one can I really focus on? And that's why I think it's worth having some sort of company historian help you, keep track of why you pivoted or how much you pivoted. All right, so each one of these, just in a little bit more details. Back to, partners, who are they? Who are my suppliers? What resources do we need from them? What key activities are we doing with our partners? My company, right? What are the key activities of my company? The resources, is it just money or is it my relationships or is it my network, right? What are my key resources in my company? The value proposition, like I said, that banking one, I found it interesting. They only said their value proposition was their deposits and their loans. But I would argue that Silicon Valley Bank had a lot of relationships, and they should have been putting that into their assets column, right? Customer relationships, obviously you want to find them and keep them, right? So how do you hang on to them? Back to what I said about nurturing your network. How do you nurture your customers so they stay with you, so you don't become stale? And then your channels, again, how do you keep channels happy? Is it just the margins? Maybe, right? Because if I'm Foot Locker, please, Nike, give me your newest shoe. Don't give me your, Air Jordan from 10 years ago, right? I want the newest, and I want them when everybody wants them, right? And then why do you think Apple started their own retail store? Why doesn't Apple just sell to Costco or Macy's?
But one main reason would be that every time there's one phone, there's like a line around the
Yes.
So like that's very good.
So they want to keep that premium price, right? If you sell it to Costco, is it easy to keep your premium price? No. Yes. Right? And they want those to be what I call loss leaders. If they can sell iPhones for half the cost, don't you think there'll be lines around the corner? But Apple doesn't want that because they want to keep the premium price, right? They don't want to become a mass discounted product. Yes, question. There's that. There's definitely that. So for example, this is what I call channel conflict. So let's say you go to Costco and you buy your iPhone for $100. I go to Apple Store, I buy it for $500. What's going to happen? And also, wouldn't the Apple Store people like wait, or more like Foot Locker? If I sell Foot Locker for $500, I sell it at Nike store for $100. Wouldn't Foot Locker be pissed? Right? So, because you're essentially grabbing all the margin for yourself, right? In my direct store, I sell it for one-fifth the price, right? My direct to consumer store, I sell it for one-fifth the price. And then to Foot Locker, I sell it to them for the retail price of $500, even though Foot Locker probably gets like, I don't know, $200-300 of that. But that still creates conflict. Because like you said, everybody will go to the cheaper one. So this is why when you have your own retail stores, you can control the price level better, right? And also doing that decoy thing, it's easier for Apple to do that, right? When they're selling their own devices, they can price it however they want.
Visible
Yeah, yeah. They don't have to, they won't. So if I go to Best Buy, I'm looking at Dell, I'm looking at HP, I'm looking at Lenovo. They each have their own pricing structure, right? And so I'm already comparing. At Apple, I can only compare apples to apples. There are no oranges there. So that's why they started their own retail. Okay. Without getting into all of this, any questions? I think what I like about the canvas is, okay, this is the more complicated one, right? But I would say for you guys, it's okay if you just do that simply put one. Yeah. 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 Franchise. Yes. More to the franchisee. Yeah.
Agreements is that compared to franchises where they can have more flexibility
Yeah.
for things.
So first of all, I want to tell you right now, the business model for McDonald's has changed. It's a real estate business, right? They own really good real estate around the country. So that's why when they do their promotion, it doesn't hurt them, right? The headquarters, so you have different incentives. So headquarters says, I want to do this promotion. It makes McDonald's look good. Fantastic. But like you said, the franchisee who owns the local one here, if it's like Subway did that, right? The $5 sandwich, everybody loved it, but it doesn't make money for everyone, right? Like if you have lower costs in the South, you're like, yeah, I'm going to sell these hand over fist. But let's say it's California, or I have a very expensive airport concession where my rent and my labor is higher than everybody else. No, I'm not going to do $5. That costs me money. And yes, Subway probably gives them the latitude to not do it. But because the McDonald's franchises is so lucrative, basically what they say goes, right? And because, like I said, they're more of a real estate business, even if it costs them money, it does, like in the long run, the headquarters, like, it's okay, it doesn't cost me. And then the franchisee kind of has to eat it because you have a very valuable franchise and you're like, okay, I'll take this one-time hit. But you're right. Over time, McDonald's will lose those franchisees, right? Because, like I said, the $5 Subway, it makes it easier for advertising. Oh yeah, right? $5 footlongs. Everybody loves it. But as you said, your cost and your labor is different around the country, right? So McDonald's says, you got to do what I say. Subway says, what do you want? What do you think will win out in the end? It's the one that gets to say, do what you want, right? So, but like I said, headquarters makes money not through these promotions. They make money. Like I said, it's a real estate business. And then Starbucks too. Those Starbucks cards, I forget what they told me. They have $600 million in Starbucks cash from all those cards. So what do you think their business model should be? Kind of. Maybe they should loan our money, right? Yeah, I don't know, but right? But see how these kind of things happen? Like, oh, it's a food business. Well, is it? Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I would say this napkin version will do. When you're starting out, the simpler you can explain it to your friends, to your angels, to your investors, start here. But then, of course, when you're more sophisticated, then you can go for that, describing everything in more details. But I really do like the idea of capturing the value of what's important to you and what you want to embody in your company. And that's why I said the bank was soulless, right? The bank shows, oh, I have deposits and I have savings. That's why people don't like banks, right? It's a robot. It's not humanistic. But then we like the Apple's guy because he's a human, right?
The bookstore,
Yeah.
and then they eat everything. And now I know that I'm they store data.
AWS.
Yeah,
Amazon Web Service makes more money.
makes more money than the Amazon.
Yeah. So the Amazon delivery, whatever, is the loss leader. The money's in the data. Right? So their business model has changed from the initial book sale, isn't it? Right? Capturing all that data is what makes them valuable as a company. Any other question about this? On the lean startup? How about on Zoom? Does anybody have questions with the canvas? Or okay. All right. So let's see, how are we on? Yeah, I'm a little past time. Okay. Well, I mean, just real quick. Again, there are different types of markets, right? So this is what I always tell my therapeutics founders versus digital health founders. My therapeutics founders, you know somebody has cancer, right? You're just trying to find a compound to solve it, right? Therapeutics. My digital health founders, they're trying to find that business model, right? They're trying to make the system more efficient. They're trying to make somebody's cancer journey easier. So they're still trying to find the business model versus my therapeutics founders. They're not trying to reinvent the business model, right? They're just trying to find a compound. Does that make sense? One's trying to find a compound, identify it, commercialize it, right? But then my digital health, founders who are trying to make the cancer journeys easier, you'll have to look at the entire system, right? How does somebody get diagnosed? How do they get chemo? How they recover? What happens when there's recurrence, right? You have a lot more systematic issues, right? More networks. It's a network, right? The network of caregivers, the network of providers, the network of people who help these people, right? Or get the treatment that they need. So that's what I want to say, that some of the business models are having to do with existing markets. Some of them are brand new. So there are more challenges there, right? Like I said about the chicken and egg, if you're developing a new social media network, how do you get people to sign up with you? Right? Incentives, freemiums, right? What else? Okay. All right. So that's all I have. Here are the resources. There are a bunch of videos from this guy named Steve Blank. So he's essentially the co-author of this, even though his name's not on there. I have a video that I really like from Nespresso that talks about their business model. So has anyone heard of the razor blade business model? So when you buy a razor, do you only buy the razor? No, you need the razor blade, right? And then which one has more margin? The razor or the razor blade?
The blade.
The blade. So same thing with Nespresso. The machine, they sell for cheaper, right? Lower margin, even though it's a couple $100. But where do they make the money? The pot. So that's the razor blade. Yeah. Okay. What else? Okay, to get in touch with me, have you guys heard of Richard Branson has an island? I forget the name of it. So for the founders and the entrepreneurs he support, they all have to go kite surfing. Apparently, that's a activity or community building. So I thought it'd be funny to use kite surfing at Golden Gate. But anyways, I'm really happy to have spent the time with you guys. So I have these personal branding classes on my KaizenThinkific.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, and also have a Coach Cody point. But thank you very much. I'm really glad to have met you all, and thank you for the opportunity. And those on Zoom, thank you. I'm glad that you're here too. Can I answer anything else? I'll hang out for a little bit, but definitely try to reach out. As I said, my office hours are pretty empty, so that means I had time to, meet with students, and I love it, right? Why else would I be doing it for 15 plus years? Thank you all. Oh, let me hand those back to you. Yeah. We should go. Nice to meet you. Yeah.
flip phone.